There's only one place I want to start this conversation. Um, Implementing functional fitness across schools in the UK. Where does
Yeah,
that
big
come
task,
from?
right?
Where's the vision? Yeah, it's a. It sounds like a huge mission, and I love the intention. I love the vision. Can you just expand on what that looks like? Where did that come
Mm.
from? And yeah, what's the end goal for that project?
Sure. So, I mean, my career, I've obviously worked as a coach, as a personal trainer for about 10 years now in total. Quite a lot of that duration has been aside a education sector in some way, shape, or form, in the sense of it's been a dual use facility, right? So, been working on a gym floor, maybe school kids have been having access to it, or I've been liaising with contacts within my network that are also PE teachers. And I think, do you know what it was? I see from my own experience in the education world, from me studying, there was always just a bit of a gap. Like it was always very sports specific, and it always has been. Like I'm talking every term from the UK basis is always either like rugby, netball, hockey, it's tennis, badminton, like sports specific training, which is all well and good. And I don't get me wrong, I love sports. I've obviously competed in sports myself, but the idea of it just being sport specific leaves a massive gap for us as trainers like yourself when you get to adulthood and you don't have a Scooby of what you're doing. Like it's like so common we see it. People don't know how to move correctly. People don't know how to hinge, squat. All of those movement patterns are just completely alien because there's not been the correct education from the grassroots level up. So that's where that initial concept came from. And don't get me wrong, I haven't invented functional fitness. That's been around for years, right? And it's also grown massively with the more events that we've had within the UK. Um, I guess just through feedback and me speaking to teaching staff and just kind of seeing that there was a need for it to be developed, and in my own passion for my own style of training and my own competitions I was entering, I just felt like there needed some form of a contact with the education sector. So that's when I started plugging away at it, really.
You said there effectively people are going through adolescence into adulthood and not
Yeah,
being able to properly hinge,
yeah,
squat. They've almost lost
mm,
touch with those essential movements.
yeah.
What are some of the knock-on effects of that? Like, what are some of the symptoms of that, and how is that affecting adults today? In the sense of why is this a problem that we need to fix?
Yeah, I mean, going slightly off that, I'm going to answer that question, but in the sense of um, reflecting on what you just said there with adolescence and how it goes into adulthood, right? So to put this in perspective, Sport England had done a survey not long ago, to be fair, we're talking quite recently, and it showcased the participation levels through different activities when adolescents leave school and go into adulthood, right? What do you think the most popular sport or activity was? Out of curiosity. So I knew the
Is
answer to the
this
question.
both genders?
Both genders, yeah.
If it was
Most
recent, I'm
popular
going to say
activity or sport.
football.
Okay, it was fitness training. So that for me is basically highlighting the fact that there is a need and demand for students, or sorry, adults leaving adolescent life that have the interest, right? You could flip it on its head, right? And you could probably say, okay, well, look, sports go into a bit of more of an elitist route. Professional sports, people start going into adulthood, they need to earn money. They're only going to earn money in sports if they're obviously a professional athlete. That is one way to look at it. But I still believe that there's a strong element of the fact that there is more interest as people reach adulthood that they want to learn about, fitness training. Guys want to look fitter and feel stronger. Same for women as well. It's from both parties. And I think that's also quite a big indicator of the fact that they've been restricted and had limitations through their educational journey that they have not had access to gyms. It's almost like we're like frightened to give access to weight training to students. And that's been quite an old, dated dinosaur approach to our education sector.
Where does that come from? Where does that fear come
It's,
from?
I, who knows? I've not managed to nail it to the T, but I think it's just been through society kind of thinking that it's going to stump growth. Like that's been a massive message for years, right? Like teachers kind of, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to get on here and start slamming teachers, right? Because obviously I'm quite close with a lot of teachers. I work heavily with the education sector, so I don't need to be shooting myself in the foot here. But there was quite a dated message through my early journey in the education sector and also through my fitness career, where it was almost like, ooh, this is a little bit kind of, daunting. There's a bit of a scare factor because if you're delivering football and you know about football, second nature, right? You go and get some kids on a barbell or even grabbing a kettlebell, they could obviously potentially injure themselves because of the weight involved and whatnot. So I think it's more the lack of education from a teaching standpoint which is then fed into the narrative that it had previously about students not having the access or ability to train with weights without potentially hurting themselves effectively.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can remember it clear as day. I went to a grammar school, so it was an all boys school, and
Mm-hmm.
it was so sport centric. Like we only cared
Mm-hmm.
about, you know, um, football, rugby, badminton,
Yeah,
even cross country running. But it was competitive. But
yeah,
there was a gym in the school, but it hardly ever got used. It
yeah.
was above the sports hall, and it was just like for sixth formers to use sometimes. But
Mm.
you never saw students in there from sort of year 11 and younger. And
Yeah,
as you were speaking there, I remember that same message vividly. Be careful about training; it could stunt your growth. And obviously, when you're 13, 14, 15, all you want to be as a young lad is be taller.
mm.
You want to be taller and you want to be bigger. So if you're doing something to potentially stunt that growth,
Yeah,
you're not going to do that activity, are you? And
yeah,
some of that dialogue needs to change, and some of that messaging needs to change.
yeah,
Um, when you began this initiative and started getting to work on this process,
yeah.
did you come up against any kind of resistance from people who had those kind of beliefs, people who had those kind of mindsets around training and young people exercising?
Yeah, it's a good question because I do get asked that a few times. It's always a case of me kind of going down that route of what I just said there with that message and people saying, okay, well, is there any restrictions or limitations or resistance from the education sector? And I think the issue that we face, right, unless you're embedded within the education sector, getting access can be quite challenging in the sense of like if you're an external company or an external individual, if you're not already got that credibility within the education sector from being a teacher or being assigned to a trust, because most state schools in the UK obviously belong to a trust, or anything of that nature, sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to get your access to those curriculum leads or even to those executive heads or directors of sport to obviously make sort of changes. So I think that's probably been maybe the biggest resistance is not because of their own personal beliefs, it's because of the access. So that's one factor to it. In the sense of actually people being forward thinking, from my own personal experience over the past couple of years, well, it's been more than a couple of years now, we're talking more 3, 4 years, but it's been all right. I'd quite openly say that the majority of people, if not all, that I came across have been quite open minded, supportive, because it's not just a case of me coming into the sessions with them or meetings and just saying like this needs to change, this needs to change. Like there's evidence behind it, right? And like we can see that provided from Sport England and UK Active now. Like I said, with the participation, we can get that from feedback from the students. You've got students that are wanting to go and access the gyms. Unfortunately for us, what we face in the UK is the funding, and you'll know yourself, like gym equipment is expensive, right? You go and get yourself a Sport England fund from a school, and that's going to give you maybe a grand. That's only going to get you a certain way with equipment. Whereas if you were to do that with, say, football equipment, it's going to get you a long way. So for the access for them to like supply a sport within the curriculum is a lot
You might
easier
get three
rather
or
than it.
four sets of dumbbells max.
Exactly, and that's my point really. So I think that's also a big resistance is potentially the funding rather than actually the individuals because there is obviously a lot of schools that do want to take part in this, and that's where I had to make it crystal clear during this journey that there can be a minimal equipment standard and then also one that's quite good, like a commercial standard. So the plan was to kind of make sure that there was an opportunity for students, sorry, not students, for staff, teaching staff to see the ability of how to train functional fitness training with minimal equipment. Talking like just their usual benches that they've got in the hall, or just going through movement patterns like a normal squat, or going through a hip hinge, or anything like that. But trying to make it fun and making it delivered in a good sense as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you can elaborate, but I suspect there's a lot more elements of play involved in that style of training with young people.
Yeah,
As you know, functional fitness can be extremely competitive, extremely challenging, of course, when you're talking about adults, you're talking about CrossFit, you're talking about, those types of gyms.
yeah.
I imagine to make it more attractive for young people and downstream from that, their parents approving of it, there has to
Mm.
be elements of fun incorporated in that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What do you ensure that the kids are getting from those sessions to make sure that it feels like play rather than work?
So the competitive element still sticks within it. However, quite a lot of the time, what I've done with my fitness team here at the gym I run is we run like junior gym sessions across a class timetable, right, across a week. Now, the idea of our sessions are to have that involvement and inclusiveness from a mixed ability basis, and that's where the blessing of fitness training can be scalable, right? Like, if you've got, say, I'm not going to get off the topic here, but if you've got a lineup of lads doing sports, say football, don't want to shine, a bad light on football, but let's get like, the example of 11 students going to be split up into two teams, or 12 students, sorry, split up into two teams of six, and you've got a complete mixed bag of abilities. They're going to stand out like a sore thumb. They are. There's always been that kind of, there's a kid that can't play football or rugby or, badminton or whatever. If you were to do that in a fitness environment, you just scale down the exercise, right? Because let's say if you was going to be doing a workout and it was going to maybe be an AMRAP, as many rounds as possible, you've got the whole class there doing a form of workout and it's certain movements. They're going against the clock. They're not going against each other. So they're fighting themselves. And it's about that inclusiveness and that adaptation to the training style, which is then going to give them that reassurance and confidence that they can do something, and that self-development. Like, I think that's a massive factor in it. Like, their mental belief and psychological approach to training will be far more beneficial because they can actually see the fact that they're not being excluded because they're crap at something.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's brilliant. I can't imagine how. I mean, take me and you for example. We're both kind of athletic, sporty backgrounds. We weren't the kid who didn't get picked in school. Let's be honest. But I can't begin to imagine how many people are out there who have negative relationships with exercise because of some traumatic incident in school where they was led to believe that they weren't good enough, that they weren't valued because because of that old archaic system of selecting students on skill level and popularity in some cases as well. And this new system just completely eradicates that because, like you said, you're working against the clock, you're working against yourself. And you know what it's like in a functional fitness session. You're too busy focusing on getting your own job done to worry about anybody else. But in those competitive sports like football or tennis or whatever it might be, you are constantly comparing yourself to other people, especially as a young person trapped in a school system. So I think that's a really, really interesting point that you just raised there. And if you kind of, forecast the next 10, 20, 50 years, if this initiative becomes really, really big and scales like you imagine it will, the knock-on effect of that will be immeasurable in terms of young people's mental health.
Yeah, just to add on that, sorry, but before we carry on. So I hosted the first multi-academy fitness games. So a multi-academy trust is basically a trust that will look after a group of schools within a certain catchment area or region, right? So this hasn't been done in the UK before. So we hosted one of them a couple of years back. And within that, we stuck with that same process of identifying a advanced level. So for students that are a little bit more advanced with their skill set with their approach of movement, or even stronger or fitter, and then a scalable approach. Let's use CrossFit for reference for anyone that's listening. So you're an RX category and then you're scaled category. Very sort of similar approach with that, but without obviously titling it the same. That just goes to show that, like, if there was going to be an away fixture for a sport, you don't just have to take the elitist students. Like, you can still take the students that don't have that good ability away from the school and get that opportunity and that self-development and that confidence and that reassurance that they're going to be able to get better. And that's what I'm trying to really get the message across with, obviously, like this, like more trust and more sites should be doing this, like internal games. It doesn't mean that you have to go and kit out with 10 grand worth of kit. It'd be amazing if you did, but you can still run some internal games or internal fitness competitions across multi-academies especially, and have that like higher ability and lower ability approach.
Yeah, that's epic. No more cool kids leaving early on a Wednesday to go play football against the other school. Everyone's
Yeah, get
involved.
everyone involved. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's fascinating seeing how passionate you are about this. Clearly it's something you've worked so hard on for, like you say, 3-4 years now.
You've been chipping away, mate.
Where does the drive come from? And where does the passion come from? And I'm curious because, we can sit here and reflect about our own school careers and the positives and negatives, the highs and the lows.
Yeah.
I know for sure there's certain aspects of my personality and behaviors that I carry out to this present day, which are directly proportional to the behaviors that I had in school.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm intrigued about your own personal journey with school and sport and involvement in education, physical education, excuse me. What was that like for you? Were you somebody who felt some of these pains that you're now seeing students go through today, or were you on the other side of the table and you want things to change?
Yeah, we could go quite deep here, but let's not bore people with it. So Yeah, I would say my experience with PE was great. Like it was really great. I actually swam at a
Do
competitive
it, man.
level.
Do it. Go deep. It's all good. It's a safe space.
It's a safe space. Yeah, so I swam quite competitively when I was a child. My education experience probably wasn't optimal. Let's say this right. So unfortunately, I was actually stripped out of the swimming club as a bit of a punishment is the word I'm looking for. Which again, I hold my hands up for. Like there were certain elements of my behaviour that probably weren't great, but I do strongly believe that was again, like you say, certain things that could have been avoided with the correct support or guidance from correct role models. So yeah, and I do think that, and I don't want to necessarily call myself a role model because like I would love to be for a number of kids out there because I do.
Are we allowed to know what the punishment was for?
No, we're not. No, we're not. I've just realised you're a little bit behind me on the time, bro. So I'll wait for you to catch up. We've caught up, yeah? Are we back in, yeah? Yeah, cool. So,
I think we're all good.
yeah, sorry, it was a bit of a delay and I didn't want to go and race off ahead and then you'd be behind. So, yeah, I mean, I would suggest that obviously, yeah, if there was maybe some better role models in the position through
Oh,
my
are you there,
education
mate?
experience, yeah, then obviously my experience would probably been a little bit better. So, I think it's fair to say that, yeah,
I think so. I'm not sure how long the delay is, but let's keep rolling. Hopefully, it
yeah,
catches up.
okay. I'm gonna crack on anyway, Danny. So I'll give you 20 seconds after I finish speaking. um, yeah, role models wise, I'll go into it one more time. I'd say that it definitely needed to be something that was a little bit better, more beneficial for my own personal experience. And I do think that obviously like this fitness initiative, not necessarily just for myself, there's other great coaches that are hopefully doing this around the UK as well. Could be something that could maybe keep people on the right path with their education. Because my experience wasn't down to like me
Oh,
doing anything that I personally feel too badly against at this time. I was just very opinionated, sorry, and defensive over um, friends and people that I was working through school with.
I want to talk to you about the fitness industry.
Yep.
I've got a love-hate relationship with it. I think it's brilliant in some ways. I think it's terrible in other ways. It needs vast improvement. I'm sure you could probably
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm
but
interested to
just
know why.
keep
But
it,
we can get on to
yeah, for sure. Just on the subject of young people,
that. Mhm.
and I'm curious to know what your opinions and thoughts are on that sort of gym bro, fitspo content that's being pushed on social media. That kind of, I mean, even if I go on social media now, I almost see like bodybuilding and steroid use and quite extreme behaviors in relation to exercise
Yeah.
glamorized
Mhm.
and almost kind of popularized. And I
Yeah.
can only assume that's detrimental for young people if they're going on and consuming that. Um, do you see that in the work you're doing with young people? Do you see any kind of impact that that's having on young people? Are they aspiring to look like bodybuilders? Are they aspiring to have six packs? Or are they at a stage where it's still just joy for them? It's still just play.
No, yeah, 100%. More towards like the sixth form bracket. So you're talking like towards the tail end of their adolescent life. That's where we kind of see it mostly. And I'm talking like on behalf of myself and my team. It's more we hear the conversations as well, right? Like I'll be training in the gym and you've got lads that are kind of like almost having banter about like certain types of steroids, but like talking as if they're on them, and it's just like as if it's kind of the norm to kind of speak like that. Which if people that are adults that are obviously training for a sport like bodybuilding, and they want to take performance enhancing drugs, by all means, you're your own person. You're allowed to do what you want. Bodybuilding, there's some great athletes that have done some great things out there. My own personal choice of training, but I've got to respect that the efforts that they put in. However, that being said, I don't think it's necessarily too positive for certain children within that age bracket to be caught up in that sort of approach to think that it's the norm. Like it's not like it should be. They need to be very much aware of the risks that are involved with that for sure. And I don't think that there's necessarily enough support or guidance from some of these influential people on social media that may be providing that, like you said, because it is very glamorized.
Yeah, I think it's just so over normalized. And sometimes I don't know what side of the fence I want to sit on because on one side it's like, look, um, you know, as many as 1 in 3 young people are struggling with poor mental health. We all
Yeah.
know that exercise can improve our mental health. It can boost our mood, productivity, energy levels, all that kind of
Mm.
stuff. Yet only 13% of the UK regularly exercise. So that number just needs
Mm.
to change. Like we can all see the links. Why aren't more people moving? And sometimes I think, well, if you're consuming content which is to do with exercise and it's increasing the likelihood of you going out and moving your body, I'm all
Yeah.
for it. But at the same time, if your induction into the fitness space is such a niche, extreme way of living, which
Mm.
by all accounts, bodybuilding can very much be that, then is that a net positive or a net negative impact? Sometimes I
Mm.
actually don't know. Actually, I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But
No,
with
you are
young
right.
people in
Yeah.
particular, I've seen that myself. It's like really over normalized, the joking
Mm.
about the steroid use, and it almost seems like anybody who has a personal trainer or a coach, like the end goal is to get them on stage and compete in bodybuilding at some point.
Yeah.
It's like, why is that the end goal for everybody who starts a fitness journey? Like you said, you exercise for different reasons. There's a million reasons to want to go and move your body, but
Yeah.
the default is almost to go and end up being a bodybuilder, which is such a niche thing.
Yeah, 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 you're right. Yeah, I think yeah, you've nailed it on the head there. I think it would be great for the education sector to start taking some ownership with these elements within fitness training because there's two very big different routes that you can follow with that, like being more functional with your approach, which then can give you the adaptation to go and climb Ben Nevis, Snowdon, do whatever peaks challenges, or go do like a high rocks or do some form of like functional fitness based competition, right? There is obviously risks involved with any form of training to an element. But it would like this is where we need to bring the education standard in tune with where the public industry is at the moment. Because like you've got a whole opportunity of window. Well, to be fair, I say that there isn't. There's not a big opportunity because most schools have such limited timetables with their PE. But what I'm saying is the opportunity of those limited times should be really well focused on educating students of like these conversations. If you are going to be going down the route of trying to better your physique, just be mindful that there is obviously a big world out there on social media that are going to potentially be leading you astray and getting you caught up in the wrong kind of elements because they're all self teaching themselves. They might well have some videos that they're watching from social media, but they are self teaching themselves. They're all experimenting and like maybe just having a few conversations with their friends. You know, if someone comes and speaks to us in our team, that's like, we got a clue. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not something I personally cycle. So the guidance is all kind of, hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean, I think I started training coming on 10 years ago now.
Mm.
Qualified as a personal trainer when I was 21. So for the first 4 or 5 years of my fitness journey, it was completely self-taught. It was
Mm.
YouTubers, it was fitness influencers, it was banter on the gym floor from gym
Yeah.
bros. That was the only education I had. Now, granted, the landscape's changed so much now. There's so much more education out there online. There's so
Yeah.
many more content creators putting valuable content out there, I would say now. However, if you're left to your own devices when it comes to your fitness journey as a young person,
Yeah.
and just kind of to underpin that, if you're somebody who potentially has low confidence, low self-worth, that kind of stuff, and you're seeking that validation through
Yeah.
becoming aesthetic,
Yeah. Yeah.
then it's a slippery slope, right? And
Mm.
in terms of education, in terms of changing that landscape within schools, that can only have a positive effect, surely.
Yeah, 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 definitely.
Um,
I think there's so much work to be done on it. I mean, they do like I know the teaching staff where the majority of sites I go and like visit and consult with, they do, they do have the means to self-develop themselves as teaching staff. But I run CPDs, continuous professional development across a number of different sites and trusts. I've been to Bedford University, wrote out a module for them for their postgrad students becoming PE teachers in their next walk-in path of their career. So there is an opportunity for us as coaches, I feel, to invest ourselves more into the education sector. Like we need to take accountability. It's all well and good myself and you speaking on camera now, or even some maybe other coaches that are listening into this conversation. But we need to kind of come together on this, right? Because I'm not doing it by myself. Let's be real. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of different sites across the UK. Where do you think I'm finding the time with that when I'm running the gym? I'm running my own business. I've got investments I'm looking to line up. I've got this personal passion and interest. I can't go and run with that at this scale all by myself. So this is where we need to be accountable for ourselves. If we have contacts in the education sector, utilize our own skill set and resources to offer that support. But then equally on the flip side of that, the education sector needs to be humble enough to accept that they need that support as well.
Is that something you're actively doing now? Is that kind of, trying to get coaches on board, trying to build this army, if you like, of people who want to see change? Is that something you're actively doing?
I've planted the seed, let's say that. I think because of this campaign, I don't know if you've seen, so I'm on my campaign at the moment, raising money for a school in India, which we can dive into later on if needed. But I think because of the way that my timetable and my diary and everything like that has just been like so crazy over the past 12 to 18 months, I would suggest it's been a little bit challenging to really kind of hone in on it. Like I'm getting these bookings at schools and universities, which I'm absolutely capitalizing on. I'm giving all the support to the existing schools that I've been working with. But to scale it further, I've got to give some sacrifices somewhere, right? Like I'm going to definitely have to need to sacrifice either one of the businesses or come away from certain roles because it's such a big task. So in answer to your question, without going too far away from it, I've been planting the seed, but I'd say it's probably not as effective as it could be if I was to maybe get all of my attention towards it.
I want to come back to your project where you're doing a ridiculous amount of time on a stairmaster. We'll touch on that in a minute. But you just because that's we need to hear this.
Yeah,
Because I think it's brilliant as well. I've looked into that and I think it's incredible what you're doing. But before we go into that, I just want to touch on a couple of things you just kind of alluded to there about your really busy schedule and having multiple things on your plate, or you're spinning several plates at once. Some things have to be compromised. There's trade-offs that have to happen. And that's a natural part of building something bigger than yourself. It's a natural
yeah,
part of building something which can shift culture, which can drive change. And I think we try to do everything, don't we? We try to have enough money or enough energy or whatever you want to call it in our pot to distribute it equally across all the things which matter. But it's not realistic, is it? Sometimes it's not realistic, and some things have to be compromised, like you said.
yeah,
I want to talk to you about balance and about protecting your own energy and routine and things like that, because I think, although they're incredibly important, I myself have experienced when you're trying to do something big or you're trying to build a business or something like that, sometimes that goes out the window. And I want to just talk to you about what your relationship with balance is like. Is it something which you're, constantly trying to preserve? Is it something you've actively accepted it might go out of the window a little bit? And just what does that look like for you? And has there been a journey with that? Has there been an evolution with that? Because for me, there definitely was. I was very, very big on having routines, very, very big on my sleep, very, very big on making sure my nutrition and training never kind of was compromised. But then reality sets in, and sometimes you can't go to the gym 5 times a week. Sometimes you get a couple hours less sleep. Sometimes you've got an extra load of work to do, and trade-offs have to be made, right? And I think that's just the reality
yeah.
of building anything substantive. What's your relationship with balance been like, and has that progressed and evolved at all as you've gone on this big journey?
Yeah, it has. I've learned definitely a lot of lessons. I went from the process similar to yourself of really having such a naive, not necessarily naive, that's maybe not the right term to it, but not necessarily a overall insight to what I could and couldn't do in the sense of like I was doing very much like myself, living by the textbook, making sure that I was practicing what I preached and really driving that kind of into myself. But then as I started to scale other things and scale other businesses and work with more clients, online clients, face value clients, as you say, like you're starting to then really try and keep that head above the water. However, I then started to get management of that and really started to build some systems that were then supportive of that to then try and get everything under the books again. If I was to talk about the present right now, I'm definitely back to where I was. I'm flapping. I'm uh, I'm flapping for air big time because I need to definitely get this campaign sorted and secured and really work with that school over in India and then really start to hone in again on my own personal rest and recovery and creativity because that's also something I really try to make sure I'm valuing as well. Like, there's a big discussion to be made around like creativity and making sure that you have got enough time in your diary to actually allow your brain to be creative with your roadmap ahead or with your current services or your relationships or your friendships and that value to life. Like you've got to really kind of put attention towards that detail, really. And I think at the moment it's there. Don't get me wrong, it's not completely fizzled out, but I'm definitely like you said, spinning plates left, right, and centre. So it's just a busy time of the year, isn't it? Like campaign and whatever else. So that'll die out, and then obviously I can get back on the saddle.
What does that look like for you in terms of ensuring that you have enough time in your calendar to be creative and also just facilitating creativity? Because it
Mm.
sometimes can't be um, sometimes it can't be scheduled in creativity.
Yeah,
Sometimes you're
yeah,
creative when you're just in the shower, you're at the gym,
yeah.
you're walking back from the shop, and something goes off in your head, and that it's just there and then it's impulsive. I think sometimes when
Mm.
we try to schedule creativity, it can go the opposite way, and we feel a lack
Absolutely.
of creativity. Um,
Yeah.
do you do anything at the moment to ensure that that level of creativity is facilitated, or is it something that you plan on doing moving forward? I was um, I was reading Essentialism by Greg McGowan. I'm not sure if you've read that book. Um,
No.
I've read it a couple of times. I think it's a really, really good book. Essentially about the pursuit of having a more simplified life in order to have a higher output. And there's a
Mm.
section in it about creativity and about making sure that you have scheduled time to play and just have joyful moments where you're lost in the moment. It could be sport, it could be baking cakes, it could be anything, but as long as you feel a sense of joy from doing it, and its relationship to creativity is so paramount. It's like, you if you have that time in your week or in your day when you just feel free and at ease, not just in that moment, but for the many moments after that, you're way more likely to have those aha moments, those creative moments where you come up with new ideas. Your mind is much more flexible rather than regimented. Um, I'm going to butcher the quote. The words to the effect of he values much more his playful side than his knowledge absorbing side in terms of what he
Mm.
values most. And I think it's so true. Like when we have the ability to be creative, our potential is like limitless. But when
Mm.
everything's like regimented and structured, our potential is potentially limited.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But yeah, what do you
yeah.
what do you do to ensure that you can still be creative and still have those moments?
I'm laughing at the question just purely because myself, because of this whole situation with the campaign and the stair climber. But generally speaking, for the past 3 to 4 months whilst I've been on this training camp, my creative side has 100% been on those stairs. Stepping on the stair climber, you've got to keep your brain occupied, right? You might be breathing slightly heavy, but there is nothing more focusing than drawing yourself towards your headspace. And that is generally where I can literally go for an hour, 2 hours and think, blink of an eye, obviously not strictly speaking, but thinking, wow, like time has passed it because I've had those conversations in my head, which will probably sound quite odd to some people, right? But because there's not really too much skill set required, you are just stepping. And I think and again with hiking as well, where I was having this conversation with a team that I took to Snowdon recently for the campaign too. With the Snowdon hike, you've got no signal in your phone. So there's no access to that as well. Some cases, some people are cracking on and they've got their distance away from others, so they're not even speaking. And you haven't got the ability to do anything else apart from just speak to yourself in your own head. Maybe driving is another example of that as well. You're not going to go on your phone whilst driving, or at least hopefully not anyway. So you haven't got distractions apart from just basic things that you can probably do quite comfortably without having to be too aware of what you're doing, if that makes sense. And I think the stairs, like I said, I've had this conversation a few times, that's why it's making me smile. But that's definitely been my past 3 to 4 months, my creative element. Call it my staircase to hell, but it's definitely been my creative staircase. Um, and then yeah, like these hikes for sure. You know what? Just finishing off that point there. If there is anyone that is looking to hike, I would 100% suggest it. Wasn't on my agenda at all. Not really too interested in hiking. I thought, yeah, great, cool, going up a mountain, reaching the peak, perfect. Bomb selfie, maybe done. But generally speaking, not only from being creative, but if you have the opportunity to do it with someone as well, the conversation depth that you get into because you're so present being there at the time. I guess it's the same, with walking around anyway. But generally speaking, because you've got such vast landscape around you, there's no distractions of vehicles or like noises. It's all just natural, right? And generally, it's been such a well well put experience in my life from going through this campaign and putting in those hikes from a creative element for sure.
Mm. I think when it comes to hiking and anything like that, really, it's almost like the absence of the external world allows the presence of
Mm.
the internal world. It's like you
Yeah.
can be ascending a mountain or something like that where there's very few other people around you and you feel disconnected from the world, but in a
Yeah,
positive
yeah, yeah,
sense.
100%. Yeah.
And that combined with that serotonin release you get from that long, slow approach,
Mm,
and you reach the summit and you feel like you've achieved something, that sense of fulfillment, especially like you said, if you're doing it with somebody else as well,
mm.
extremely rewarding. I've done Snowdon myself and I absolutely loved it. Um, for anybody listening, talk to us about the Stairmaster challenge that you're doing because it's quite ridiculous.
Yeah, whose great idea was this, by the way? So, I've had the blessing of being brought into a campaign through clients that I currently train as a family of four. Wasn't always training the family of four. I was just training the dad. His name's Vikash. And Vikash and his lovely wife Rita set up a charity this year called Galaxy Foundation, where they were looking at different projects. First one being a school in India in a really underprivileged location in Kolkata. So these children that have now got the opportunity to study there are first generation learners, never in the whole of the community, never had any form of education provided available. Just a really sad situation to be in, obviously, for the process of poverty, unfortunately. Anyway, so they've obviously built this school over in June. It went live. They've now got, I think, just under 100 or just over 100 now. It's something on the 100 bracket. Students currently enrolled. And these are, like I say, either children that would normally get exploited, so either getting trafficked, working in warehouses. And we're talking kids. We're not talking like adolescents here. We're talking like young kids. It's like quite severe. And I know some of us might already be aware of the severity of things like this happening in the world, but realistically, you're not necessarily going to appreciate it as much unless you see it firsthand. I haven't seen it firsthand yet. I'll be going at the end of the year to go and see the kids and work for the school to try and help and support them. But the idea of this campaign, and when Vikash announced that he was building this school, I said we've got to do something with this. Like, he mentioned that he wanted to do Everest, and I thought he was a little bit wild because he's a fit guy, and I thought he was just referring to himself. So I thought, yeah, okay, let's do it. Like, if you want to do Everest Base Camp, or even Everest as a whole, like, I'll train you for it. He came back a conversation later and said that he wanted to do it with his family of four. So I'm talking a kid that's 10, one that's 13, and then two adults. And I thought to myself, has he
You
completely
definitely
lost
can't back
it?
out now.
Nah, and I thought, like, has he completely lost it? So that was the initial kind of start of this whole conversation and journey with Hike for Galaxy, the campaign. So obviously, yeah, I had a team meeting with the family. They've signed themselves up for it. There's a family of four obviously taking on Everest Base Camp. And don't get it twisted for anyone that's listening. Everest Base Camp is still a way up. Yeah, we're still talking far bigger than Snowdon, far bigger than Ben Nevis. The altitude sickness that they're going to experience when getting to Everest Base Camp will be quite severe. And again, just to remind everyone, you've got 10-year-old and a 13-year-old doing this. Yeah, so like that, this is 9 days of like 10 hours of hiking, ascending,
There
and
must
in
be
a
some
5 day
serious there must be some
risks.
serious risk attached to this.
Oh, 100% there is. And they're fully aware of it. And we've been doing an extensive training plan for this. Like, we haven't been doing hard approach. The past 11 to 12 weeks, they've been going to Peak District, Snowdon. They've done Snowdon twice now. They've been doing Peak District every weekend. They've done like all of these summits and scaled these amazing, amazing mountains across the UK because there was only that short window of time from June until this point now. It's come around fast. They leave on the 1st of November, but I'm rooting for them. I think they'll be all right. They're very mentally strong, and that's one thing that we really tapped into early on was their mental resilience. Because you can be fit, but you can't prevent altitude sickness completely. If your body's going to experience it, there's medication that you can do to support it. But fundamentally, it's going to be the case of you being mentally strong enough to keep pressing on. So that's that. That's where the campaign led to. So they've obviously taken on this challenge. I tried to bag myself a free ticket, respectfully got declined. They'll be listening to this, they'll be laughing at that. And yeah, I decided to run my own kind of challenge in the wisdom that I have by taking on the whole of Mount Everest, so the whole summit, totaling 44,250 steps, to the equivalent height of Mount Everest, across a stair climber, unbroken, which is going to be an estimated time finishing of around 12 to 13 hours.
I didn't know it was unbroken, so you can't take a break. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, let's be realistic. If I really need to go to the toilet, I'll talk to you about the different approaches I've got without going into too much graphic with it. But if I really am desperate to get onto the pan, I'm going to go to the pan. Let's be real. However, with that being said, I've approached during this training training plan, a few different approaches if I need to urinate. So one of them was medication to relax my bladder. Didn't go too well. Avoided that, started feeling a bit uncomfortable with it. The next
Oh,
approach
as
after
in
that was,
you've trialed this already. This isn't just theoretical.
yeah, no, I've tried this, yeah, yeah. So this is the same medication they applied to people when they wet the bed. I shouldn't laugh at this because it's not fair for people if they obviously experience that, right? Like, I don't mean to
No,
insult
no,
anyone with it, but that's my
no
experience of
offense to anybody no offense to anybody who desperately needs that medication for medical
yeah.
reasons. But I'm just laughing at the idea of you on a stairmaster, um, 6 hours in, and it all goes horribly wrong because your medication isn't working.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then obviously when I felt that discount, I thought, you know what, I can't do this. I'll have to think of someone else. And I was speaking to someone, and they said there's these like festival bags that people use where you can like pop open a bag and like urinate in the bag, and it turns it into like a gel form. It's like some sort of chemical in there, and it does this reaction. So I was like, sweet. So you just need to have the ability to obviously stair climb whilst obviously pulling the trolleys down and urinating in this bag. So there's a bit of coordination involved, right?
That's a
So
skill in itself.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So any awards for that would be welcomed. But the yeah, the idea is that basically if I need to go and urinate, that's my approach for that. And then obviously if I'm desperate for the pan, obviously I'm going to be waddling off, obviously stiff as a board and trying to obviously hover and get back on. Um, so yeah, appreciate you diving into the detail of that, mate. Thanks.
I'm sure everybody's fascinated to know. I'm just asking the questions everybody wants to ask. Don't worry.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you.
In terms of the physical training for that,
Mm,
I'm assuming it's like running a marathon, right? You might run several half marathons. You might run a couple of,
mm,
20 milers beforehand.
yeah,
Is it something similar with this? Are you doing like half
yeah,
Everest? Are you doing like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I've done the hard efforts, etc. And I've been quite mindful of it. So anyone that does do quite lengthy shifts on a stair climb will know that the knees that you get are just shot to bits, right? So I've really had to work on like my patellar tendon specifically, building up my tibia as well, working in my calves, and just doing a lot of accessory movements like tib raises or like reverse walking on a hip mill or reverse sled walking with some weight. Um, Calf raises obviously to really try and like build up some resilience within them as well. Hip flexors, building up my mobility, and just being mindful about my body position on the stair climber. Like in the sense of like how I'm placing my feet, making sure my hips are obviously in the right position rather than kind of like slouching because then your lower back will kick off. Like it's because the duration of it, right? Like if you get yourself fixed in a bad posture, like position with bad posture, then you're naturally going to feel the aggravation from it. So it's been a lot of that, a lot of chipping away with stair climbing, not a lot of exciting training. I can't lie, it's not been too exciting this past 12 weeks from a training point of view. But at the end of the day, I've got a job to get done, so that's what I've been training for.
and I'm assuming there's no holding on to the handles.
There is and there isn't, because in theory, like you say, you probably allow, sorry, not allow the fact that you're not holding onto the handles. But again, like if you go onto the stair climber, right, and you're trying to like drink a drink or you're trying to consume food because of the duration that I'm on it, are you really expecting me to like take the risk of potentially falling off when I'm already like, jelly legged as it is, to not have like
Yeah.
a hand
Oh,
placement while I'm
but by
like,
the way,
that's,
the sheer fact that you're attempting this, you have way
yeah.
more credibility than me. Like, I'm not going to judge you for holding the handles when you're climbing Everest on a stairmaster.
Yeah, so there will be a bit of holding. I can't take that away at all because anyone that sees me there is going to obviously witness that. So the idea is that, yeah, I attempt it. I'm going as fast as possible, trying to break that 12-hour mark. The only concern I've got with it, I reached out to three people that I found online. I've only found three people that have ever done this, and all three pied me. So if you're listening to this, respond to my message, really, because I wanted to get an insight. I wanted to find some feedback of like what your experience was and kind of see if there's any kind of positive, negative insight that you could maybe relay. But unfortunately, yeah, I got pied. So
Interesting how they couldn't even give you any words of warning. It wasn't even
yeah,
like,
yeah,
mate,
yeah,
don't do this. Worst thing I ever
yeah,
did.
yeah.
Save yourself. Don't do it.
Oh yeah, it's just whatever it is. It's just like yeah, reached out. They probably went into their junk or something. But yeah, so that's that really. So that's happening next Friday. Setting off at 7 a.m. and then cracking all the way through till hopefully around 7 p.m. I've got like a number of lives that I'm doing across the day. So you're welcome to join if you want to get on the stair climber, bro. But yeah, there's a few people like getting a little shift in, kind of give me some like support through it for a little time, and then yeah, let's get the job done. It's all for a great cause. Campaign's doing really well. We're approaching the 15 grand mark swiftly now. Um, so yeah, we're shifting.
Wow. Where can people find this? Where can people find their lives? Where can people support?
Yeah,
And just generally more about what you do, because this isn't the first thing you've done of this caliber, I would say. Like, I mean, I first met you a few years ago now when you was running Course Havoc,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
it just seems to be like every few months you're onto something new and bigger and better.
yeah. It
Where
gives
can
my
people
it gives my
stay up to?
partner a headache.
Yeah,
That's
where
it.
can people stay up to date with you and what you're up to, and how can people support this brilliant thing that you're doing?
So yeah, I mean, predominantly I'll be on Instagram or Facebook. You can search my name on Instagram, Jack with a double K underscore Clarke with an E. Jack Clarke on Facebook, obviously. The link tree on my bio will actually take you to the Just Giving page where you can find the campaign details. You can find the details of the family as well, the amazing family that obviously built this school, and the whole project in line with obviously building this amazing venue for these children over in India that won't ever have the access otherwise. So yeah, it's a special project. It's definitely one that I'm really, really excited to see unfold. And like I say, this is only a small drop in the ocean compared to what we're lining up.
Can you tell us a little bit about what's coming, or is that under wraps?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm also lining up in October, which again, diary is just not really cut out for it. A Free Peaks 24-hour challenge. So I'll be doing that with a collective group of us attempting a Ben Nevis, Snowden, and Scaffold Pike within a 24-hour window. Um, so that'll be a nice, tasty challenge. We've got obviously, yeah, the next CPD from the trust, which is then going to involve schools all across the country. We're talking like Bedfordshire up north. Sorry, not Bedfordshire up north. Up north into Bedfordshire, Lincolnshire, Essex, Cambridgeshire, Northamptonshire, over towards the Midlands as well. We're involving the schools involved with this campaign. So they're also taking on their own challenge where their students within the school will be either taking on a stair climber if they have access to a stair climber, or the perimeter of their field for a set distance, the equivalent of that 44,250 steps. So that's quite an exciting one. We're looking forward to getting out to the schools and really involving them from that side of mass nature. And then obviously when I fly out at the end of the year, it'll be to obviously really build up the skill set of the teaching staff currently in India to implement this functional fitness approach within their curriculum for PE.
Jack, this is the Better Blueprint podcast, and I started this podcast because I wanted to create a blueprint for better, for people to listen to this and just take one piece of information, one nugget, one piece of value, which they can practically implement into their lives to lead a happier and healthier lifestyle. If you were to write a blueprint for how you conduct yourself, how you live your life, values, ethos, that kind of stuff, what would be at the top of that blueprint?
I think we've all got our own networks, right? And I feel like if we use those resources to support others in need, it'll be a great place, right? I mean, that's quite a cliche comment, and I know a lot of us might well think that already, but even from a smaller scale, you utilize your network, not necessarily expecting other things back, but it will naturally come back anyway. And I think we definitely need to utilize the power of network a lot more. There's a lot of people sitting on the fence or just sitting in a room and not activating that network that they have.
Jack, it's been a pleasure. I'm so glad we got to do this. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for
me
your
too, bro.
time. I'm sure we'll have many conversations again, and good luck with everything because it's epic, it's monumental, and I think you might need a bit of luck, to be honest. I definitely would need a hell of a lot of luck to do 44,000 steps on the stairmaster and not cry myself to sleep for 6 months afterwards. So, hats off to you. What you're doing is incredible, and I'm sure we'll stay in touch
Thank
as
you, man.
well. But yeah, good luck with everything, and thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you, bro.